Good morning. We are going to learn about the 8th chapter in biology textbook, that is human health and disease. So let us start with the contents. A brief introduction, common disease in human, immunity, AIDS, cancer, and finally drugs and alcohol abuse. The main context which is discussed here is about health. So let us learn the definition of it, which was given by WHO. It is a state of complete physical, mental and social well-being and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. So the discovery done by William Harvey about blood circulation and demonstration of normal body temperature in persons with black bile disproved the good humor hypothesis. So mind influenced by neural system, endocrine system and immune system, together they affect health. So the main factors affecting health are, so that is genetic disorders, deficiencies with which a child is born and that deficiency is inherited from parents from birth. Second one is infections and third one is lifestyle, including food and water we take, rest and exercise we give to our bodies, habits that we have or lack, etc. So the main conditions or the factors that affect good health are, so balanced diet, personal hygiene, regular exercise, then clean water and food, rest and recreation, then control of vectors, etc. So many common diseases are in our biology chapter. So any improper functioning of the body or malfunctioning of the body leads to disease. Disease can be broadly grouped into two categories, communicable and non-communicable disease. Otherwise, it is called infectious or non-infectious disease. So, some disease that are transferred from one person to another person, such diseases are called communicable disease. Example, fever, cough, pneumonia, typhoid, all are communicable disease. Some disease that are never spread from one person to another person, such diseases are called non-infectious or non-communicable disease. Example, blood pressure, diabetes, heart attack. Okay. So, any organism that causes disease. So, that is pathogens. So, you know that many pathogens, name virus, bacteria, fungi, protozoans, helminth. So, some common disease in humans are typhoid, pneumonia, common cold, malaria, amoebiasis, ascariasis, elephantiasis and ringworm. We study one by one. So, first one is typhoid. Typhoid is a bacterial disease. It is caused by Salmonella typhi. So, this bacteria affects the small intestine of human beings. So, the main symptoms of these diseases are sustained high fever, that is 39 degrees Celsius to 40 degrees Celsius. Then diarrhea, intestinal ulcer, loss of appetite, constipation, headache, weakness. So, the mode of transmission is contaminated food and water. So, it is diagnosed or confirmed by a test called viral test. So, a story behind this one, a lady named Mary Mellon, nicknamed as Typhoid Mary, she is a cook by profession and she is also a typhoid carrier. She spread this disease to many people through the food she prepared. Second disease is pneumonia. The causative agent of this disease is Streptococcus pneumonia or Haemophilus influenzae. So, it is another bacterial disease. The affected part is alveoli of the lungs. So the main symptoms are fever, chill, headache and cough. So in severe cases, the lips and the finger turns bluish or grayish in color. So the mode of transmission is inhalation of droplets or aerosols released by infected person or by sharing glasses and utensils with an infected person. So the third disease is common cold. It is caused by rhinovirus. The affected part is nose and respiratory passage. The important symptoms of these diseases are nasal congestion and discharge, sore throat, cough, headache and tiredness. So the ways of transmission are droplets from cough or sneeze of an infected person which are inhaled directly or through contaminated objects. Next disease is malaria. It is caused by a tiny protozoan parasite, Plasmodium. Different species of Plasmodium are Plasmodium vivax, Plasmodium falciparum and Plasmodium malariae. Of these, Plasmodium falciparum causes malignant malaria. It is the most serious one and death occurs. The schematic diagram of Plasmodium vivax is shown here. When the infected mosquito bites a healthy person, then it injects the sporozoid stage, that is the infectious stage, into the bloodstream. The sporozoids reach the liver through the blood. Then some sporozoids attack the RBC. The liver cell and the RBC burst. The asexual reproduction takes place in these two regions. Then some sporozoids again attack the liver cell and RBC. Some parasites changed into male and female gametes. So that is gametocide. So the sexual stage starts from here. At that time, the female Anopheles mosquito takes blood from that infected person. They take blood along with this gametocide stage. Then further development takes place in the mosquito's intestine, that is fertilization and development. Then after that, this sporozoid stage travels into the, that is escape from the intestine, and it migrates to the mosquito's salivary glands for the next attack. So this Plasmodium vivax is a digenetic parasite. It completes its life cycle in two hosts. One is human and the second one is female Anopheles mosquito. So these are the points that already discussed. The next one is amoebiasis, that is amoebic dysentery. The causative agent is Endamoeba histolytica. So the important part, it affects the large intestine. So the infectious stage of this amoebic dysentery is cyst. So the main symptoms of these diseases are constipation, abdominal pain and cramps. Then stools with excess mucus and blood clot. So the parasite transmitted from the fecal matter of an infected person, then drinking water contaminated by fecal matter. So the next disease is ascariasis. It is caused by Ascaris lumbricoides. It is found in the intestine, and the important symptoms of this diseases are internal bleeding of intestine, muscular pain, fever, anemia, blockage of intestinal passage, etc. So this parasite transmits from one person to another person through the contaminated food. Then contamination takes place through fecal matter of infected persons. So the next disease is elephantiasis. The elephantiasis is caused by Wuchereria. It exists in two genera. One is Wuchereria bancrofti and Wuchereria malai. So the affected part of this worm is lymphatic vessel of lower limb and genital organs. So this disease transmitted from one person to another person through the bite of Culex, female Culex mosquito. The important symptoms are chronic inflammation of the genital organs and the lymphatic vessel of lower limb. So, the last one is ringworm disease. Ringworm disease is caused due to the presence of 3 species of ringworm, that is Microsporum, Trichophyton and Epidermophyton. So it affects the scale, nails, folds of skin in groin and toes. So this is transmitted from one person to another person, that is through the infected person uses the towel, cloth or even comb of that person's. So the important symptoms of these diseases are appearance of dry, scaly lesions in skin, nails, scalps, and lesion is accompanied by intense itching. So the prevention of infectious disease. So the personal and public hygiene is very important. So then different methods are adopted to prevent the insect-borne pathogens. So that is use mosquito nets, then use spraying insecticides, then door and windows should be provided with wire nets. The next one is immunity. The overall ability of the immune system to fight against the invading microorganisms are called immunity. Immunity are of 2 types, that is innate immunity and acquired immunity. The first one is innate immunity. The innate immunity is non-specific and it is present at the time of birth. The innate immunity is provided by 4 different barriers which prevent the entry of foreign organisms into our body. They are physical barriers, physiological barriers, cellular barriers and cytokine barriers. The first one is physical barrier. Skin and mucus are examples for this. Skin is the most important barrier which prevents the entry of microbes in our body. The second one is mucus. Mucus coating epithelium lines the respiratory, gastrointestinal, urinogenital tract, also traps the microbes. Then the physiological barriers are tears in eyes, saliva in our mouth, acid in the stomach, all traps the disease causing microbes. The cellular barriers are the WBC, so the PMNL, that is the polymorphonuclear leukocytes, then monocytes, the natural killer cells in our blood and macrophages in tissues. They phagocytose and destroy microbes. Then the fourth one is cytokine barriers. The virus infected cells produces a protein. It is called interferons, so which protect the non-infected cells from further viral attack. So the next one is acquired immunity. Acquired immunity is always pathogen specific and it is based on memory cells. So some diseases, you know that some diseases, once it attack our body, they never attack again. So for example, chickenpox. So what happens there? So our body encounter a pathogen for the first time, produces a response. So that response is called primary immune response. So which is of low intensity. So the same pathogen attacks second time with a high intensity, then that immune response is called secondary immune response, or otherwise it is called anamnestic response. So these processes takes place with the help of 2 types of lymphocytes in our body. One is B lymphocytes and another one is T lymphocytes. B lymphocytes arise from bone marrow. T lymphocytes arise from thymus. So B lymphocytes have the ability to produce the antibodies, but the T cells, they do not produce any antibodies, but they help the B cells to produce antibodies. Then the third one is they form the humoral or antibody mediated immunity. So that is, these lymphocytes are found in our blood. So the word humoral chains. So the T lymphocytes form cell-mediated immunity. The B cells do not take part in organ transplantation, but the T cells take part in organ transplantation. So the antibody or immunoglobulin, they are of different types in our body, that is IgA, IgE, IgG, IgM and IgD. They have their own functions also. So do you know that what are antibody? Antibodies are glycoproteins which interact with the specific antigens and produces response. This is the diagram of antibody molecule or immunoglobulin. It consists of 4 polypeptide chains with 2 small chains and 2 longer chains. The small chains are called light chain. The 2 longer chains are called heavy chains. These 2 chains are linked together by disulfide bonds. So a constant region is shown in the lowest portion of this long chain, and a antigen binding site is also shown in the anterior portion in a lock and key fashion. So according to the antigen it will vary. So next we are moving on to the next slide. Active and passive immunity. When a host is exposed to antigen in the form of living or dead microbe or its proteins, antibodies are produced according to the antigen. So this type of immunity is called active immunity. So the passive immunity, that is artificially produced antibodies introduced into a person to counteract antigens. So the best examples are colostrum, and the second one is the fetus also receive immunoglobulins from the mother's body. So the next slide is vaccination and immunization. So these two processes takes place according to the principle memory cells. So a preparation of antigenic protein of pathogen or inactivated or weakened pathogen are introduced into the body. According to this, antibodies are produced against this, and it would neutralize the pathogen during actual infection. These antibodies act as protective agents during the infection. So they also produces memory B and T cells. So for example, in the case of snake bites, the injection which is given to the patient contain preformed antibodies against the snake venom. So recombinant DNA technology use some yeast etc. They prepared hepatitis B vaccine. So next slide is allergies. The exaggerated response of the immune system to certain antigen present in the environment is called allergies. The substance which causes allergies are called allergen. The important allergens are dust, pollen, animal dander, etc. So the immunoglobulin or antibody involved here is IgE. The important symptoms are watery eyes, running nose, sneezing, breathing difficulty, etc. So the chemicals produced from mast cells are serotonin and histamine. So the drugs prescribed here is antihistamine, adrenaline and steroids. The next slide is autoimmunity. So our immune system fails to recognize self cell from non-self cells. So two corollaries are mentioned here. One is higher vertebrates can distinguish foreign molecules as well as foreign organisms. Second one, sometimes due to genetic problems. So best examples are multiple sclerosis and rheumatoid arthritis. Moving on to the next slide, lymphoid organs. These are the organs where in origin and or maturation and proliferation of lymphocytes occur. So lymphoid organs are classified into two categories: primary lymphoid organs and secondary lymphoid organs. Primary lymphoid organs are bone marrow and thymus. Secondary lymphoid organs are spleen, lymph nodes, tonsils, Peyer's patches of small intestine, appendix, etc. So in primary lymphoid organs, immature lymphocytes differentiate into antigen sensitive lymphocytes, then migrate to secondary lymphoid organs. In secondary lymphoid organs, it is the site for interaction of lymphocytes with the antigen, which then proliferated to become effector cells. So bone marrow is the main lymphoid organ where blood cells are produced. Thymus and bone marrow provide microenvironment for the maturation and development of T lymphocytes. Spleen acts as filter of blood and a large reservoir of RBC. Lymph nodes serve to trap the microorganisms. So lymphoid tissues are also located within the lining of the major tracts such as respiratory, digestive, urinogenital tracts. So it is called MALT, mucosa associated lymphoid tissue. So it is about 50% of lymphoid tissue. So one diagram is here. So the primary and secondary lymphoid organs are mentioned. The positions are mentioned here. So moving on to the next slide. AIDS, that is acquired immunodeficiency syndrome. It was first reported in 1981. So the causative agent of this disease is HIV, that is human immunovirus. It is a retrovirus. So the RNA was the genetic material of this virus. So how this HIV transmitted from one person to another person? So first one is through sexual contact. Then second one is through infected syringes and needles. Third one is through blood transfusion, contaminated blood transfusion. And fourth one is through infected fetus to from the mother's body. So this is the life cycle of HIV. A schematic diagram is mentioned here. So the retrovirus, then it enters the body, then it attacks the macrophages. The RNA genome of the virus particles replicates to form viral DNA with the help of the enzyme reverse transcriptase. So the viral DNA gets incorporated into host cells DNA and direct the infected cells to produce virus particles, and in this way it acts like a HIV factory. So same time the HIV enters into helper T lymphocytes, it replicates and produces progeny viruses. The progeny virus released in the blood and attack other helper T lymphocytes. This process is repeated, leading to a progressive decrease in the number of helper T lymphocytes in our body. So in this period, the person suffers fever, diarrhea, weight loss, etc. So the person starts suffering from infection due to bacteria, especially mycobacterium, viruses, fungi, and even parasites like toxoplasma. So a diagnostic test helpful to identify this virus. So that test is called ELISA, that is enzyme linked immunosorbent assay. So moving on to the next slide, it is prevention of AIDS. So AIDS Control Organization, that is NACO, then non-governmental agencies, that is NGO, and WHO started a number of programs to prevent the spreading of HIV infection. So that is safe use of that is disposable needles and syringes, then free distribution of condoms, controlling drug abuse, advocating safe sex, and promoting regular